I read my mother's text 3 times before I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. Not because I didn't understand it. I understood it perfectly. I just needed a moment to confirm that a person who raised me had actually sent those words to me on a Tuesday morning while I was still in my work scrubs, hadn't even had coffee yet, standing in my own kitchen in my own apartment that I pay for with my own money. The text said, "We've made our decision. You're either with this family or you're not. Don't bother showing up Sunday." Sunday was my grandmother's birthday dinner. A dinner I had been organizing for 6 weeks. I had reserved the private room at the restaurant. I had coordinated with my aunt flying in from Denver. I had ordered the custom cake. I had called my grandmother every 3 days for a month to make sure she knew exactly what we were planning so she'd have something to look forward to. And my mother was telling me not to bother showing up. I set my phone down, poured my coffee, and sat at my table by the window. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not someone who creates drama. I am not someone who picks fights or sends long accusatory messages or shows up at people's houses making scenes. I am a registered nurse. I work 12-hour shifts. I come home tired. I call my family. I show up when I say I will. That has always been who I am, and the people in my life have always known exactly how to use that against me. So let me back up, because the text on Tuesday was not the beginning. It was just the moment I finally stopped pretending I didn't see what was happening. My older brother had been living with my parents for 2 years. He's 34, he lost his job during the pandemic, and never quite found his footing again, and I understand that, I genuinely do. But at some point, not finding your footing becomes a choice, and everyone in my family had agreed, without ever saying it out loud, that the person responsible for helping him find it was me. It started small. Could I help him with his resume? Sure. Could I look over a cover letter? Of course. Could I lend him some money just to cover his car payment this month? Fine. And then the next month. And the month after that. It was never framed as a loan after the first time. It was just assumed. I'd get a text from my mother, not from him, from my mother, telling me that he was really struggling, and that I knew how much he needed support right now. And I would transfer the money because the alternative was the conversation. And the conversation always went the same way. The conversation was always about how I had advantages he didn't. How I had gotten a scholarship. How I had moved to a city with better opportunities. How I was single with no kids and therefore had more flexibility. Every true thing can be used as a weapon if the person holding it decides to aim it at you, and my family had turned my independence into evidence of a debt I owed them. Last spring, my parents decided they wanted to move. They'd been in the same house in a suburb of Columbus for 26 years, and my dad's knees were getting bad, and they wanted something smaller, something without stairs, somewhere they could age comfortably. I thought that was reasonable. I offered to help them research neighborhoods. I offered to come home for a weekend and drive them around to look at places. What I did not offer, and what I did not agree to, was what my brother apparently told them I had offered. He told them I would cover the down payment. I found this out not from my parents asking me, but from my mother mentioning it casually on the phone in March, thanking me for being willing to do that for the family. I remember sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage after a night shift, exhausted, and hearing her say that, and just going completely still. I asked her what she meant. She said my brother had told them I was in a really good place financially, and that I had said I wanted to help them get settled somewhere nicer. I told her I had never said that. There was a pause, a long pause. And then she said, very carefully, that maybe there had been a miscommunication. I said I would talk to my brother. He denied it. He said he had just been telling them I was doing well, that he hadn't promised anything on my behalf, that I was misremembering or misunderstanding. He said it with such confidence that for about 48 hours I genuinely questioned myself. That is what years of being told your perception is wrong does to a person. You stop trusting what you heard with your own ears. But I had not misheard my mother. She had been specific. She'd said down payment. She'd said I had offered. I talked to my grandmother about it. She's 81, and she has the clearest mind of anyone in my family, and she has never once told me what I wanted to hear when the truth was more useful. She listened to the whole thing, And then she was quiet for a moment, and she said, "Sweetheart, this is not the first time your brother has done something like this." She told me about two other things that had happened. One involving money borrowed from an uncle that was never paid back, and that my brother had implied my parents would cover. One involving a favor called in with a family friend that my brother had arranged in my grandmother's name without asking her. Small things individually, a pattern when you put them together. I thanked her. I got off the phone, and I started paying attention differently. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things I had explained away before. The way my mother never asked my brother to contribute to the dinner reservation cost, but mentioned to me 3 times that the restaurant required a deposit. The way my father talked about the new neighborhood they were considering, a neighborhood that was significantly more expensive than what they'd mentioned before, as though the budget had already expanded. The way my brother texted me links to used cars he was looking at, not asking, just sending them, the way you send someone a link when you expect them to offer. I didn't say anything. I just started keeping notes on my phone. Dates, what was said, by whom. I don't know exactly when I decided to do that. I think some part of me knew before the rest of me was ready to admit it. The Sunday dinner was supposed to be April 13th, my grandmother's 82nd birthday. The Saturday before, I called my mother to confirm the final head count. That's when things broke open. She told me that my brother had mentioned I might be able to help him with first and last month's rent on an apartment, that he had found a place and it would really help him get back on his feet, and wasn't this a good thing? Didn't I want him to be independent? I told her I had not agreed to that, and I was not going to. She said she didn't understand why I was being so resistant when I knew how hard things had been for him. I told her I had been helping for 2 years, and that the helping had started to feel less like helping and more like being expected to fund decisions I wasn't part of making. She said I was being selfish. I said I disagreed. She said my brother had told her I had a savings account with more than enough to cover it and that it wasn't going to hurt me. I want you to stop and think about that sentence for a second. My brother had been discussing the details of my personal finances with my parents, not in a vague way, specifically enough that she knew I had a savings account and believed she knew what was in it. I asked her how he would know anything about my savings. She said he'd seen a statement once at the house. I had not been to my parents' house since Christmas. I had not brought any financial documents to Christmas dinner. The only way he could have seen a statement was if he had gone through my things, my old room, where I still keep some files when I visit, because I'd never had reason not to trust my family in my own childhood home. I stayed very calm on the phone. I told my mother I needed to go and that I would talk to her tomorrow. She said fine. She seemed to think the conversation had gone the way she wanted. The next morning, Sunday, I sent her a text. I said I would not be covering any rent, that I needed her to understand that what my brother had done with my financial information was a serious violation, and that I wanted to have a real conversation about the pattern I had been seeing before I was willing to move forward with any of it. That's when she sent the text I told you about at the beginning. "We've made our decision. You're either with this family, or you're not. Don't bother showing up Sunday." I read it 3 times. I put my phone down. I drank my coffee. And then I made 3 phone calls. The first was to the restaurant. I explained there had been a family emergency, and I needed to cancel the private room reservation. They were gracious about it. I lost the deposit, which was $200, and I made a note of that too. The second call was to my aunt in Denver. She had already landed. She was at a hotel 20 minutes from my parents' house. I told her what had happened as clearly and as calmly as I could. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I'm so sorry." I knew something wasn't right. She said she would figure out the evening. I told her to please make sure my grandmother had a good birthday regardless. The third call was to my grandmother. I told her I wouldn't be at dinner. I told her I was sorry and that I loved her. She told me not to apologize, that she understood, and then she said something I have thought about every day since. She said, "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a family is stop letting them get away with things." I spent Sunday alone. I cleaned my apartment. I went for a long walk. I called a friend who lives 2 states away and talked for an hour. I did not look at my phone for most of the day, and when I did, I had 7 missed calls from my mother, and 4 from my brother, and a text from my father that said only, "Call your mother." I did not call. By Monday morning there were 19 missed calls total. I went to work. 12 hours. 2 patients in crisis, 1 family meeting, a code at 3 a.m. that we pulled through. When I came home at 7 in the morning, there were 31 missed calls. My brother had texted 11 times. The text started frustrated and became increasingly frantic. The last one said, "The restaurant says you canceled. Where is everyone supposed to go? Grandma is upset. You did this." I set an alarm and went to sleep. When I woke up at 2 in the afternoon, I had 44 missed calls and a voicemail from my father. My father is not a man who leaves voicemails. In my entire life, I can count on one hand the number of times he has called me instead of texting. I stood in my kitchen, and I listened to it. His voice was different than I expected. Not angry, tired. He said he didn't fully understand what had happened, but that he could see things had gotten out of hand, and that he thought we needed to talk like adults. He said he was sorry that the dinner fell apart. He said he missed me. I sat down. That is the part they don't tell you about setting a boundary with your family. They tell you it's empowering, and it is, eventually. But the first moment it actually works, when the person you've been waiting to say something real finally says something real, it doesn't feel like winning. It just feels like something breaking open, and you're not sure yet if that's the beginning of something better, or just the end of the thing you thought you had. I called my father back that evening. I told him I needed him to understand a few things before we talked about moving forward. I told him about the financial information. I told him that I had been transferring money to my brother for 2 years and that it had never once been framed as a choice, only as an expectation. I told him about the down payment conversation, what my mother had said, what my brother had denied. I read him the dates from the notes on my phone. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't know about the statements." I said I believed him. He said, "I didn't know how much you'd been sending every month." I said, "I know. Because no one asked me if I was okay with it. They just assumed." Another long silence. And then he said something my father has maybe said to me twice in my entire adult life. He said, "I'm sorry. I should have been paying more attention." We talked for almost 2 hours. I am not going to tell you it fixed everything, because it didn't. My brother has not apologized. My mother and I have had one short, careful phone call that ended without resolution. There are things in my family that are going to take a long time to work through, maybe longer than I want to admit to myself. But I canceled the restaurant reservation. I removed my brother from the account I had been transferring from. I had a conversation with my grandmother's care coordinator, separately, about making sure I was notified directly about any family decisions that affected her, so nothing could be arranged or promised in my name without my knowledge. I took back every access point I had quietly handed over across 2 years of just trying to keep the peace. And Sunday, 2 weeks later, I took my grandmother to lunch, just the 2 of us. A small place she likes near her house that has good soup and terrible parking, and a waitress who knows her order. We sat there for 3 hours. She told me about the year she turned 26, which was the same age I am now, and what her life looked like then, and what she could not have predicted about the decades ahead. When we were leaving, she held my arm in the parking lot and said, "You know what I noticed today? You weren't tired." I hadn't noticed it until she said it. But she was right. I wasn't. I want to say something to anyone watching this, who recognizes any part of this situation. Not the specific details, maybe, but the feeling. The feeling of being the one who organizes, who transfers, who shows up, who covers, who keeps the machinery running while everyone else runs the machine. The feeling of being told that wanting something for yourself is the same as taking something from someone else. You are not a bank. You are not a logistics coordinator. You are not responsible for funding choices you were never invited to make. Helping people you love is one of the best things about being alive, and it is completely different from being expected to make up for every gap their decisions create. One of those is love. The other one is just labor that no one has agreed to pay. When I didn't show up to Sunday dinner, my brother texted me and said I had ruined everything. What I had actually done was stop running a machine I never agreed to run. And the interesting thing about that? Once I stopped, everyone found out very quickly what it actually took to run it. I am not telling you what to do in your situation. I don't know your family. I don't know the history, or the specifics, or the moments you've made in the small daily choices of loving people who are complicated. What I do know is that the moment I stopped managing the consequences of my brother's decisions, I had more energy, more clarity, more space to actually think about what I want my life to look like, rather than spending all of it backstopping someone else's. My grandmother said I wasn't tired. That's the whole story, actually. That's what changed. I'm curious about something. Have you ever had a moment where you stopped doing something you'd been doing for so long that you didn't even notice it was costing you anything, and only when you stopped did you realize how much it had been? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story felt familiar in any way, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.